Dr. Zenchuk, take us away.
Okay, very good. You can see the opening slide here. And Rick, to get us started, do you have any opening comments or anything that you want to share with us before we have a couple other slides with stuff on for you to talk about too, but I thought maybe you want to just introduce today's session.
Yeah, I mean, today's topic really is a very interesting one. It's a very involved one. I mean, this is one that could go on more than an hour and a half. And we could get into some very detailed things. Our overall goal with this particular topic is just really some introduction, some basics. And if you look at what this series is, this is a kind of a Blackboard Basics series. Several have been asking for some very involved things, some more advanced things, and I think those are good, but we're trying to keep this as basic as we can to get everybody up to speed for where we're going this fall and what's going to be some options and opportunities. Now, there are folks who have been working in Blackboard for several years and may want to do some more advanced things, and if that be the case, please contact us and we'll be glad to put together some very, very specific things. Specific things for your department, possibly specific things for, just general topics on, getting involved, maybe some more advanced topics about how you set up specific things for testing. Example, I suspect that the math department may wish to do something like, really structure some very involved, detailed online testing options, which goes well above and beyond what I think our scope is within these initial trainings. So if those are things that you want, we can certainly do them, but we just remember in these seminars from last week's and then the 3 that we're doing this week that John's leading us through, these are kind of some back to basics kind of things, showing you some things to think about as you start to put together classes for the fall. Whether you're online, whether you're on ground, whether you're synchronous, whatever it's going to be, utilization of Blackboard can be a wonderful augmentation tool, or it can actually conduct your teaching, or it can be a blended hybrid approach, whatever term you wish to use. But there's what we're hoping that you're walking away from these series is that the utilization of Blackboard, or any LMS for that matter, becomes yet another pedagogical platform and opens up some pedagogical opportunities that you may or may not have thought of. So with that, John, we can kind of go ahead and get started.
Okay, very good. Any questions before we get started?
John, I was just going to say there's quite an echo on your audio, at least the way I hear it. I don't know if everybody else is hearing it too, but I just wanted to let you know.
Oh, okay. That's odd. Okay.
Yeah, Rick, your audio is on.
Is that any better, Shannon?
Yeah, that's way better.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, anybody else have anything before we get started? Okay, to pick up on what Rick was just saying, I put together on this slide for he and I to talk a little bit about, or actually the next 3 slides. We've been asking for during all of the sessions last week for you to email Rick with any ideas for expanded topics that you would like to see us address in the future after these seminars are over. And we picked up on some ideas based on your comments and things and questions that you were asking over the last 3 seminars. So I kind of just took an opportunity to put some of them down here to give you some ideas. And if any of these strike you as those kinds of items that you really want to delve deeper into, let us know. And those will become maybe a session like this or small group. Like Rick mentioned, maybe a small group for the math faculty on how to use, let's say, integrate electronic whiteboards and the kind of equipment that you're going to need to use and how you might want to integrate that in with Google Hangouts or with Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, for example. So it could be either for small groups or it could be a general thing for everybody for faculty across the campus to enter into, like you're doing for these, but targeted to a specific topic. And some of these might be, as you can see here, a complex individual project that might take students multiple weeks to complete. If you want to see examples of how that can be done and how you would use Blackboard to facilitate that, either for synchronous or asynchronous online, let us know. That would be one example. Second, a group project that takes each group multiple weeks to complete. And I think somebody had already mentioned the fact that how do you deal effectively with groups and how do you use software to facilitate groups? So that is a whole seminar in and of itself that we could potentially put on as well. A research paper assignment that will require students multiple weeks to complete. In other words, how can you provide them feedback along the way, even though you're not necessarily in a face-to-face class as they make their way through writing a paper. You don't want to just assign a paper at the beginning of an 8-week session, say it's due at the end of 8 weeks, and really not talk about it and facilitate their progression throughout the 8 weeks. And there are some pretty interesting ways that you can do that, and we would like to share some of those with you in a session if you're interested. The next one, group work and meeting with groups during class meetings synchronously. So, for example, if you're using Google Meet to meet in real time with your students, and you want to put them into small groups, and then you want to visit the small groups and as they're working, give them suggestions and ideas, that's a whole nother topic that can be put together as instruction. Or individual or group presentations when classes meet synchronously, how you actually facilitate having the students present. Student or group presentations, alternatives using asynchronous instruction. In other words, if you decide you want to go asynchronous, you don't want them to present in real time because you're in an online class and you can't get everybody together at common times for that, there are other alternatives. I've used, for example, things like having them work in groups to create narrated PowerPoint presentations that then I collect and give back to students so that they can review each other's group work and then comment on them in discussion boards. So there are other pedagogical ways to deal with it if it's not synchronous, asynchronous, and still get the same idea across, have people work together, have people put presentations together, and have everybody have an opportunity to see those presentations, even though it might not be in real time. Various types of guided discovery learning, where you really, if you were in class face-to-face, you would be actively engaging students, walking around, helping them, and so on. How can you replicate that in a totally online asynchronous environment or in a synchronous environment? So that would be a whole nother thing we could delve into for an hour and a half or more. In addition, creating ways to use online discussions creatively. There's lots of different opportunities. I even use online discussions, for example, for group work, which can easily be done. But you can also use other features in Blackboard for setting up groups for asynchronous or for synchronous instruction. We're going to get into that a little bit on Friday. Friday's one of the major components of Friday's seminar, this session this week, is going to be online discussions. We'll deal with other things too, like blogs and wikis and so on. But really, online discussions will be a main focus for Friday. For Wednesday, our main focus will be assessments, tests, rubrics, projects, how to provide instructions for them, how to work with them in both a synchronous and an asynchronous fashion. Secondly, using narrated slides. If you haven't used PowerPoint or other software to narrate in the past, and you're not quite sure about the features that are available in PowerPoint to create those slides and also to convert them to MP4 or to upload them to YouTube as YouTube videos, from the PowerPoint slides, we can go into that in more depth as well. We'll introduce that a little bit more in the series this week, but we can't go in depth and in small groups with you to actually have you do it while we facilitate and answer questions, which we could do in seminars coming up in the future. How to use and link YouTube and other types of videos. You're going to see a lot of that in the examples that we provide today. But we're going to have Shannon later introduce how to do it mechanically in Blackboard, but we could go in much more depth than what we're going to be doing today. And again, that could be another whole seminar. And then something that was brought to my attention last week when I was talking with Phil Miller from our IT department. He's our CIO, and he mentioned that he's been looking at multiple add-on products that either are currently available or will be available with Google Meet in the future. And one of them that's currently available is Jamboard. And Jamboard is a Google product, and it's an electronic whiteboard. We talked a little bit about using electronic whiteboards in math classes, for example, to show how to use, how to maybe facilitate showing students in real time or through video in an asynchronous session, how to solve math problems step by step by writing on a whiteboard. That's the software that currently exists within Google Meet that can help you with that. So we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. But that's gonna, if you want to really delve into that, that's going to really require a whole separate session. And then with regard to assessment, that was all about instruction. But with regard to assessment, building Blackboard tests, creative ways to use testing features, how to use journal entries effectively for assessment, either formative or summative, how to use Respondus lockdown browser and monitoring feature for testing if you intend to give closed book exams in an asynchronous or synchronous method remotely. And more on the use of rubrics and more on how all the different nuances and features of using the Blackboard Grade Center, which again would be another hour-and-a-half seminar at a minimum. So these are just some of the topics. And then I notice I put up there in any others. So if there are any others or any of these, if you go back and review these later, if you let Rick know about what you think your major needs are moving forward, then the CIT can actually address some of those needs. Rick?
Yeah, just a quick comment. Many of the topics that John rattled off and went through, a lot of these in their basic format are already posted and up on the CIT Blackboard shell. If you're not sure where to find things, we've been trying to organize this as best we can. If you have gone into this Blackboard shell, there is just a plethora of information that has been uploaded within a very, very short period of time. We've collected things that John has done, I have done. We have recorded a number of the sessions that have gone on over the past 4 or 5 months. Everything is there. If you're not sure where to find something, please email me. I will direct you. We're trying to figure out best ways to organize this. I was thinking this morning that there's a probability that we need to find some way to index this. But we will come up with a way, because there's a lot of information that is there. There is information that is also posted on the CIT webpage under the frequently asked questions and things like that. There are links to lots and lots of different tutorials. The Respondus lockdown and the monitoring is one of those, and there's just options and opportunities there. So without reinventing the wheel, that information already exists, and if you're looking for that, it is there. John?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Not all of these have to be hands-on sessions or workshops or face-to-face through Google Meet or in person. We have a lot of training materials already available to help with a lot of these. So yeah, please reach out. One way or another, the point I think Rick makes really well is just reach out and let us know what your needs are so we can help you on an individual basis. I'm sure Shannon and Alicia could also point you to things and help you as well. Okay, so moving forward, I want to mention one thing before we get started with today's materials. In my conversation with Phil Miller last week, he made available to a few of us that were meeting with him the fact that he is really in touch on a regular basis with Google, and he's a member of what is referred to as the Google Meet Early Access Program, which means that our institution is a beta test site for the new features that Google puts out, particularly with Google Meet. They are trying to keep up with and be competitive with other types of platforms like Zoom and so on. So we are a beta test site, and as things roll out for beta, Phil is planning on putting them up on and making them available to faculty. So for example, the one that I have up here, the black background blur and replace that's in the red box, he told me that that's something that he's supposed to be rolling out this week. So that should be available in Google Meet, which wasn't available previously. So if you want to see how to do that, or if it's not appearing for you, let the IT department know so that they can help you get that set up on your version of Google Meet. What that does is obviously allows you, when you're presenting or any of your students, or when you're in a Google Meet session, to be able to blur your background. If you don't want to see them to see your room or whatever, it tries to zero in on your face and just presents you and blurs out the background. Or you can replace your background with other types of backdrops by using a JPEG image. So those are just, that's one option that's already here. The other ones that you can see that, I mean, these are all ones that Google is planning on putting out, but the ones that are in yellow form here are ones that he tells me that should be coming, and I can't promise, or he can't promise, and Google can't promise that they'll be here before the beginning of the fall semester, but as they roll out, they'll become available. And I think some of the things that faculty have expressed as concerns, especially in the fall with going online, having synchronous sessions, being in virtually rotated classrooms that use Google Meet, are things like, how am I going to take attendance, or how can I use breakout rooms similar to the way you use breakout rooms in Collaborate Ultra in Blackboard, or polling in meetings where you can say, okay, just enter a yes or a no, and it shows up on the screen how many people said yes, how many people said no, or hand raising. Like you can see in Zoom, there's a hand raising feature. There will be one in Google Meet. Digital whiteboarding, even though they do have Jamboard, I think Jamboard eventually will go away, and they're going to be integrating something more directly with Google Meet that is referred to as a digital whiteboard. Noise cancellation, like the problem that we actually just had with having too many mics on, trying to correct that issue. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that might be coming over the next month, 2 months, 3 months, even into next year from Google that will make Google Meet a little bit more robust. So I just wanted to make sure that you were on the lookout for that on an individual basis, for the kinds of features here that might be important to you in your different classes coming up. And I'm sure that the IT department will be putting out emails each time a new feature is added to Google Meet, so that you'll have a heads up that you can look and see if it's installed properly on yours, if the feature's available. And usually Google's pretty good about putting instructional videos out that we could make available so that you could learn how to use the feature. So just something to look forward to in the future. Does anyone have questions or comments about that before we move forward? Okay, great. Okay, now, again, another quick thing before we move forward with our material for today. This was what we did on session 3 on Friday. And just to go over real quickly and see if you have any questions, or you want me to, or Rick or Shannon or Alicia, to address any of these concerns that you have about that material. We talked about reviewing with students the first week of class, or for the first class meeting in the case of online, a welcome, providing the course syllabus, talking about different ways that you can do that if you're not, in real time. Highlighting textbook information, facilitating student introductions in online classes when you aren't meeting face-to-face, develop and maintaining the concept of instructor presence, planning and developing content for an introduction folder as part of week 1 for online courses, or maybe a separate link in the left navigation panel for first class meeting whenever you're dealing with face-to-face, and using Blackboard as a supplement, opening up the course shells in advance, using features to view Blackboard as students will see the content and interact. So we went through a demonstration of that to make sure that you could see what they see, because then you can put instructions for students together in a more meaningful way if you understand what they're experiencing. And then explain your Blackboard structure to students as the course begins, and how to walk them through it and how important that is, so that they'll understand how you intend to use Blackboard in your course, because not every instructor uses it the same way. So moving forward for today then, our overview is to provide you with some suggestions on how to design, develop, organize all the instruction and related instructional materials, now getting into the nuts and bolts of your course content, and trying to do it in a way that's clear and concise with as few words as possible, or using videos or whatever to introduce topics, for the purpose of, as much as you can, actively engaging students, like you would try to do in the classroom, how you could also convert that and try to do that equally as well in online asynchronous courses. So for for the first topic today. First, we'll concentrate on online mostly asynchronous courses, because many of us will be, as I understand it anyway, will be teaching more online than we have in the past in the fall, potentially. If some of your courses were converted to online, or you agreed to have them converted to online, or if in the case of a worse outbreak of the pandemic, we're all forced to go online like we were in the spring. But at any rate, the main concept here, I think, when you're trying to give them weekly, or even, usually you present your material in chunks of a week, but not to overwhelm them by throwing everything at them at once. I think what you want to do is you want to think about your concepts, your main concepts that you want to deliver that week, and you want to break your topic and topics down into those concepts, and then you want to develop separate lessons for each topic, or for each concept that you want to get across that week. So this is in educational jargon, this is referred to as chunking. You take a large amount of instructional material and you break it down into component parts so that students aren't so overwhelmed and they can deal with one major concept at a time. So we're going to look at that from the perspective, as I said, for fully online asynchronous. And when you do that, what you have to keep in mind is that everything that you say, if this course were being presented face-to-face, you somehow have to replicate in online and make it. It doesn't have to be exactly the same way, but the material and the way you would explain things and so on has to somehow still get to the students. And that's whether that's in using text, or whether it's using video, or whether it's using narrated presentations, or whether it's using some synchronous sessions or whatever. You still have to make sure that they understand. You can do that by having full coverage of why they're doing what you're asking them to do, explaining to them what you want them to do, giving adequate directions for each component, like why do you have a handout? Why do you have a video? What is it being used for? How are you going to use it? How long is it going to take? And when you put each one of your lessons, instructional lessons together, kind of estimate the instructional hours that it takes for that component to be worked through from the student end, on the student end. And then as you put all of the instructional hours together, you add them up for all of your weeks, and you know how important that is to address so many instructional hours with regard to each course, regardless of whether it's delivered on ground or online. Also, get into this a little bit more later, but this idea of chunking these lessons also becomes very valuable for those of you that are teaching on ground courses, and maybe you want to go to a conference and you're going to have to miss an entire week of instruction because it's a night class and it only meets once a week. Or it's a day class and you're going to miss 2 out of your 3 Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes. And you know that what's been communicated already is that you can put it online. But you have to make it sure that it meets instructional hour standards. You can't just say read the textbook or do this assignment. That's not considered adequate instructional hours, and we've all talked about that. So what I'm getting at here is that these online lessons that you put together for totally online delivery, if you think about it, you could take any one of these lessons and they could also be used in a face-to-face class as equivalent instructional hours. So this isn't just for fully online classes, the concepts that we're talking about here. What I want to do with regard to this topic then is to look at it from 4 different perspectives. Depending upon the type of course you have and how much of each of these types of instructional strategies you use within each one of your course already. So rather than thinking of online as a totally different entity, think about it as what would I do if I were teaching it face-to-face, and then try to come up with different ways of being able to present the same material, but fully and directly for the students. So if your face-to-face classes, because of the nature of your content, is largely, or a large part of it is direct instruction, then there are ways specifically that you can convert direct instruction to online, fully online. Things like videos and narrated slides. Those aren't the only ways, but those are some of the ways that come to mind, obviously, to most of us initially. direct instruction may have gotten a bad rap over the last 20 years as education tries to push all teachers at all levels into considering more constructivist strategies, which I think is a good thing. But I also think that constructivism, which means hands-on learning, the guided discovery, and those kinds, indirect learning and so on, those kinds of things are important, but so is direct instruction. And it depends really on how you feel as the instructor, your style, what's best for the students, based on also the content that you're presenting. And what I always recommend to people is a combination approach. Know about how to do both and choose those that are most appropriate for the given moment. And so direct instruction is one method that should not be dismissed, particularly when you're thinking of converting to online, fully online, asynchronous. Second type is a guided discovery, where you actually have, you kind of give students cues and you guide them through and let them do things that will eventually take them to a deliverable. Like, for example, the outcome being a written research paper, or the outcome being a successful team project, or what have you. The third one is hands-on activities, where if you were in class face-to-face, you would actually have the students be doing something, creating something, or beginning an activity or a project or an assignment, and then maybe continuing it later. Well, if that's the case, how can you replicate that in a synchronous online environment? So we want to talk a little bit about that. And then other instructional aids, like, for example, in your face-to-face, if you use student examples or previous student assignments to show students or demonstrate to them, you can still do that in asynchronous online. Or if you're using advanced organizers, you still want to consider using those in online, or any other types of ways of relating content to students. You want to think about ways to replicate that. So let's look at each one of those separately. The first being direct instruction, such as lectures or instructor demonstrations. Those can be very powerful and effective ways to teach. But if you do that, the literature says this, and I think I found that through reception of my students over the past X number of years, that you may want to limit the length of the direct instruction videos and narrated slides that you present. If you're in K-12 and you're in elementary grades, you're gonna try to do some of this, they're gonna be really short, like 2-3 minute segments. If you're in middle to high school, you can go up to maybe 10-minute segments. If you're in higher ed, like we are, okay, you can go a little bit more, but even so, I wouldn't suggest ever going over 30 minutes, and 15 minutes should probably be the max for consideration most times. So if you have a lecture that you normally would lecture in class for 30 minutes or 50 minutes, not a problem, just break it down into multiple videos and segment them by concepts. That way, your students can view the separate videos at different points in time. They can concentrate on just one concept at a time. And then it forces you to provide both an introduction and a conclusion to that concept in that video before they move on to the next video. So that's just a suggestion that comes from the literature and through practice that I think makes a lot of sense that you might want to consider. All right, so now the best way that we thought we could get through this and provide you with as much information as we possibly could that hopefully will be meaningful to you is to provide you with a number of examples. So I hope everybody can see this slide adequately. I know I tried to make the text as large as possible, but still keep extracts from different online courses. Here's an example taken from one of my instructional leadership and management online courses. This is an idea of how you might want to present an online lesson with direct instruction where you're using slides that you've narrated, PowerPoint slides. So as you can see up at the top there, attached is a file that says textbook chapter 2.pptx. So that's relatively straightforward. They could simply go through the slides in PowerPoint. Everybody should have PowerPoint installed in their computers. This is generally not a problem. But don't just put it up there and say, use these slides. I mean, give them some context. And this goes back to the concept we covered on Friday with regard to instructor presence, where it would be important to give them a little bit of direction. This doesn't have to be elaborate, but I think say, read chapter 2, The Nature of Leadership, which focuses on the different types of leaders and the differences between a leader and a manager. Like, give them the main concept, and then say, after you've read the chapter, view the attached narrated slides for some important concepts from the chapter. You could say, after you read the chapter, I've also said at different times, as you're reading the chapter, follow along with the slides. And then I put the page numbers on each slide. It depends on how you want to do it, what the content is, how long the content is, but there are various ways even to do that. And then it's impossible with all of your instruction that you're going to give students for a week, let's say, for you to have direct assessment after everything. So for example, then to test them immediately on what they learned in chapter 2. So in light of that, you might want to do something which we refer to as formative assessment. And formative assessment can either be graded or ungraded. So what I've done here with this example is I'm using what is referred to as formative assessment by putting a line here and then saying chapter 2 self-check. After completing this task, reading the chapter and going through the slides, can you answer these questions? And I make it very clear in this that they aren't to answer it and give the answers to me. This is rhetorical. They should answer it on their own. Can you explain what Gardner means when he states that we must not confuse leadership with status, power, or authority? Or how does Gardner view the role of manager versus leader? Or after viewing the videos, can you explain the difference between how the presenters in each view the role of leader versus manager, and what's their perspectives, and what does it mean for leaders to institutionalize their leadership? So those would have been some of the main concepts that they should have gotten from it, so that they know what to focus on. That might fall into something in a discussion board that you might want to pick up on later, or that will be graded, or a journal assignment that you might want them to reflect on, or maybe some test questions in an exam that you're going to give them on multiple chapters, maybe halfway through the course in a midterm, for example. But those are just some examples of how you can develop an online lesson with direct instruction using instructor-narrated slides solely. Any questions on that example? Okay, and then we move to the same thing, online lesson with direct instruction, but this time it's a little bit more elaborate. In other words, what I've done here, in addition to asking them to read the chapter, is also to view 2 YouTube videos that kind of already have been developed by others that are done really well, that pull out several of the concepts that were identified in the chapter and further explain them. That can be something you do through an instructor-developed video, or it can be something that you use. Saves you a lot of time if you can find some good ones that have already been developed, as I did here. So in this particular case, instead of making an instructor developed narrated PowerPoint for the chapter, you might want to just use several YouTube videos that highlight certain concepts from the chapter in addition to reading. So it's kind of like either use your own slides or use other people's videos, or use a combination of both. So another example lesson here from that same course is early on in the course to explain the difference between theory X, theory Y, and servant leadership. So in this particular case, I broke it down into 2 different concepts. And then the first one is on theory X and Y, the second on servant leadership. And I have them view a number of different videos that were already put together, or a handout, like in the case of this, journal articles that relate to each of those, so that they can first watch the video, read the article, do the same thing here, and then on top of it, also include a video from the instructor, an instructor-developed video. And rather than attaching it up here as a PPTX file, put it in stream, since the other ones were in stream, so that they would then use this narrated PowerPoint presentation called What is Leadership as voiceover slides. And I provided it in 2 different formats because sometimes MP4 is a little bit more clear than the PowerPoint slides. And if they have a problem with one version or the other, generally I get no feedback from them saying I couldn't view the video. And then also include the concept self-check. So those are 3 different ways of approaching the same topic. direct instruction, with using some combination of YouTube videos or narrated PowerPoint presentations that you put together, or journal articles that also reflect concepts that you want to pull out and magnify for the particular lesson that you're putting together. And what you do is you put it in, as I would do it, is put it in sequence by the order in which you think it is most valuable for your students to go through the lesson. And then as you add up the times of each one of the videos, plus however long this one you think would take the students to go through, then that would be your instructional hours that you're presenting in lieu of a face-to-face lecture that you would be doing in your classroom. So moving backwards a little bit, again, just a narrated PowerPoint, use of, instead of a narrated PowerPoint to highlight from that chapter, maybe YouTube videos, or putting together a more complex multi-concept lesson with segmented pieces using YouTube videos, journal articles that you have students link directly to, in addition to some narrated slides when you pull it all together at the end. So lots of different ways that you can do this. It's up to you to develop the combination the best way that you could. And I think any one of these three could also be used in a face-to-face class if you, for some reason, couldn't make class 1 week or one night or whatever. This could just be plopped right into a Blackboard shell for them. And then you could also include an assessment right after that, whether it be an online discussion or a journal entry or whatever, to make sure that students did follow through on the lesson. Anybody have any questions on that before we move on? That was a lot about direct instruction. Anyone? Anything in the chat, Rick? Chat box? No? Okay. Okay, the next example here is taken from a different course, Curriculum Design and Assessment. And this is a lesson on writing goals and objectives, because not only do we have to learn how to do it as faculty members in higher ed, but so do all my pre-service teachers have to learn how to do it for becoming teachers. They do this on a weekly basis. So this is an extremely important concept for them. And when they're taking an online course here, it makes it much more difficult to get those concepts across. So I use multiple means of delivery here in order to try to replicate what I would do in the classroom. So the first thing here is an introduction, and notice that there are what I would refer to as Chapter 8 summary points. When they would click on that, they would open up a Word document that I would have bulleted lists of important items from the chapter as a review. That's one way. Here's another, is a YouTube video that shows a two-part video actually on a lesson on how to write effective performance objectives. More on Bloom's taxonomy, because they should have already read that in their textbook. But here is an introduction to Bloom's taxonomy in video form, and also a handout. Another thing that you might want to consider when you're, even for face-to-face classes, but also for online, is the fact that all your students don't learn the same way. Some people learn better by watching a video, others learn better by reading it in a textbook. So to provide duplication here isn't always a bad thing. And what it does is it addresses multiple learning styles at the same time. So this was actually a longer lesson. So this is part 2 of that lesson. But again, it would have been online. It would have been a direct instruction lesson, but it would have also included students doing a few things. So I've got to try to replicate that here in online. So at the end of the lesson, you could do what I have here, as you can see in red, what is called a lesson practice. So here it says, after you've gone through all of this, and this will stand out to them, please read and study this handout, which would be this one, Aims, Goals, and Objectives, that you can see right here by them clicking on. Carefully before attempting to complete the initial post for the following online discussion. So I'm going to have them in an online discussion work with these concepts with each other also. And they're going to develop some sample objectives that they write, and they're going to critique each other's. And I'm going to jump in and also do that, just like I would do in class, except I'm going to do it in the online discussion. Furthermore, it also says here that, but also this will help you with next week when you go to develop one of your assignments. And one of those assignments is going to lead to an element for their overall final 8-week project for the course. So I want to get across the importance of this lesson and how the background for this lesson is going to be used this week in an online discussion, as well as next week when they do a formal assignment that they hand in. So those kinds of things can try to be replicated in an online environment, thinking about what you do in your face-to-face environment. Does anyone have any questions before we move into guided discovery on any of those concepts related to direct instruction? Okay, this, as you know, like this video.
John, yes. Kathleen does have a question.
Okay, Kathleen?
If she's on my
that she left the meeting, so.
Okay.
Yeah, her
Okay.
question was, how do you account for instructional time if you have included multiple ways to complete a lesson? There is, and if you would look on 2 places on the CIT website, at the top there is a conversion table that we have just recently updated and posted there to give you some general ideas of time when you are considering that. That information is there. It is also posted in the CIT Blackboard shell, and that will give you some general guidelines, Kathleen, as to what you're doing. They're not hard and fast. Certain things are one-to-one. In other words, if you're making transitional time from what you traditionally teach in your face-to-face, trying to find some way for asynchronous accountability to that, this can help guide you to that. And if you've got specific questions on any of those kind of things, if you're not sure, please feel free to contact me, Alicia. Shannon will be glad to assist and help you along that.
Yeah, and I think maybe I misled you a little bit because I wasn't saying to put duplicates out there. I'm expecting all students to go through all of them. What I was saying is that some people with certain learning styles will gravitate more to understanding concepts from the videos than others. But when I'm viewing the videos, and this is really important, I view the whole video. You can't just assume it looks good based on a title. So you have to make sure there's not a whole lot of duplication between what you say in a handout versus what's in a video versus whatever. There'll be a little bit of overlap, sure, but I don't think you put it in there purposely for full redundancy, if that helps. So then that would mean that you should be able to count all components as instructional, part of the instructional hours.
Okay, so you're saying that the PowerPoint and the video are different, but if a student prefers the video over the PowerPoint, you're still going to count both?
Yeah, but again, the content in both are not the same necessarily.
So if they don't go through both, they're going to miss some content.
Yes, I tell them to go through everything. Now you don't have to. You could do that if you wanted. I don't do that, but you could segment out part of your lesson and say either or, like do this or this. But that gets to be where
Right.
a lot of work.
Right. Okay,
so
that was a misunderstanding on my part. I just thought that you were saying that the PowerPoint, that students learn in different ways, and that sometimes the PowerPoint is better for them than the video or vice versa, and so that one would suffice for the other. And you're not.
I understand. I was making
content.
Yeah, I was saying the concept, but yeah, I don't know. That would be a lot of work, Kathy, I think.
Okay, right, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, anybody else? Any other clarifications? That was really important because I don't want miscommunication, or sometimes I don't say things as clearly as I need to or go too fast over something. Okay, we're going to move on then if there's nothing else, and we're going to talk next about guided discovery. You may not be familiar with the term, and yet you might use this all the time as part of your instruction in face-to-face courses or in online or synchronous courses. Guided discovery is when you just basically don't give them all of the full instruction up front like you would in direct instruction. You give them pieces to do, and then you ask questions about it, or you guide them through it through a multiple step process so that they can provide you feedback on what they're learning. You can provide them feedback and guide them through the process that way. So let's take a look at some examples of this. Guided discovery can be with, let's say, short answer questions. It can be done with hands-on instruction where you expect them to develop a deliverable for that week, or for maybe something that takes 3 or 4 weeks. And it also works very well with project-based learning. So if you're going to give a major project in class, and it's going to take, whether it be a research paper or whether it be the creation of a curriculum design, or whether it be a needs assessment report, or whatever, major financial statement from an investigation over multiple weeks, whatever your deliverable is, if it's a project that's going to take a long time, you might want to use guided discovery to bring them along through the project. And so we're going to take a look at some examples here. The first one, with regard to guided discovery learning, is when you use multiple instructional materials, such as textbook, some YouTube videos, maybe even a publisher supplied video if they're available through the supplementary materials that come with textbooks, or even websites. So the first example here that I have done, and if you try to do this with 5 or 6 major things, in Blackboard all at once, it becomes very confusing and becomes very long. So instead, what you can do is something like I've done here, put it together in a document assignment. So I'm going to bring up the document here and show you what I mean. So this is an attached document. I set this up as a template for students, and I tell them when the assignment is due and how many points it's going to be worth, and that it covers chapter 1 in the textbook, and some of the terms that they need to become familiar with, technological terms from the chapter. And then I start into, okay, here's a question. I give them instructions. First, identify a specific course subject and grade level that you teach now. Remember, these are pre-service teachers, or they're teachers that, or I'm sorry, mostly already certified teachers coming back for a master's degree, or will most likely teach in the future. That would be for pre-service teachers. Next, if you had your choice, what type of classroom hardware setup would you prefer? Explain in detail your hardware choices for both you, your students, and describe what types of instructions and activities you would use with that hardware and hardware choice. Because in the textbook on page 7, there are diagrams of the different kinds of choices, and they talk specifically about that. So as they're reading through the chapter, I have them answer specific questions. And I even give them a place for them in the document to type in their responses. Here's the subject, grade level, and the explanation based on the question that I give them, and tell them how many points that particular question is going to be worth. And I go down through here and do this for multiple questions as they make their way through the chapter. Notice page 7, page 13 to 15 reference, page 15 to 16, a couple of questions. And notice also that I sometimes go outside the content of the textbook and provide links, like right in the Word document, say, okay, visit this website and then answer this question, even though it still directly relates to the concept that's in that particular chapter. Same thing with this question. And here's another one. Here is a YouTube video that I pointed to, but this YouTube video happened to also be an example that was given directly in this particular textbook. So I happened to find it also on YouTube. But at any rate, I could build a question around them viewing that very short video first. I think this is only a 2 or 3 minute video, but then they can answer the question with regard to that. And I try to directly relate the questions back to how they would apply it, not just spitting back answers about what they read in the textbook. And even giving their opinions on certain, maybe controversial types of software types of concepts related to software, excuse me. So that's one approach to be able to take when you talk about guided discovery. You're kind of guiding them through the chapter. You're pointing out the most important concepts, and you're ensuring that they understand how to apply that concept by actually having them answer questions that you then have to grade, which is no fun. Because then you have to download these Word documents. You have to go through them, grade them, put comments in them, and then load them back up to Blackboard for feedback. It's a lot of work, but it is effective. I must say it works, and students usually feel very good about the fact that they know you read it, they got meaningful feedback, and they know where their ideas of concepts might be a little bit off. A second type of lesson with regard to guided discovery might be using your text, some YouTube videos, and some narrated slides. In the last case, I didn't use any narrated slides. I didn't build my own slides and narrate them, but this is possible. And this is actually a lesson that I took from Rick, because Rick used to teach this master's level course in our master's program in instructional leadership. And with him taking over the new roles and so on last year, I took over that course, and we, in our department, we're very good about sharing materials with each other. We have no problem with that. We do that all the time. And if somebody's taught a course previously, we just say, hey, I've got stuff. If you want to use any of it, feel free. We put each other in our course shells. And Rick gave me his and said, go for it, whatever you want to use and so on. And if I use something directly, and I didn't use this very often, but if I use something directly, like I used his narrated PowerPoint, then I gave him credit. So Rick, do you want to talk a little bit about this particular lesson? Since it was really yours to begin with, and I just kind of stole it from you.
Yeah, one of the things that we want to do, this is actually a leadership styles inventory through a couple of researchers, Kozas and Posners, who actually took their research and kind of popularized it, and it's just become a leadership practices inventory. It's used in this leadership class. And this was one of those things that I wanted to make it as interactive as possible. And in a face-to-face course, it's a real easy thing. You just simply, have the students do this, go out and take the inventory. Basically what this is it's an inventory where they take it, and it's what is known as a 360 inventory, where they would go out and have their peers, have their superiors, have their subordinates possibly answer this fairly short questionnaire, and then it would generally be sent back to a third party. That third party would then review it and then give them kind of anonymous feedback on what their leadership style is, what's good, what's not good, and what aligns with the teachings of Kozas and Posner's work. Well, when we moved this to an online course, I was trying to figure how we were going to do this in such a way that it would be reflective, it would be interactive, and it would be a way for the students to get the most out of this. So what I basically set up for this, and John has all the instructions laid out here, is that it was very, very simple. I had the students take the self-inventory first. I had them copying. We were able to provide copies of this through PDF. Students can also, they were at one point having to purchase these copies, but Kozas and Posner's allowed us to put these up as a PDF, and they could then share this with other folks that they wanted to have take this. And instead of having this done where it would be sent back to a third party or sent back to me, because the last thing I have is enough time to sit around and tabulate a whole bunch of different things, what I had them do is I had them send this back to themselves. In other words, they would send it out to their boss, have the boss send it back, do it as anonymously as possible. But we had them then do a comparison between what they said their practices were and what other people said. And then I had them write a short reflective paper, like no more than 2 pages on what their findings were. It was very, very involved for them, in the sense it really gave them some reflective perspective. And I had it written as a reflective paper. I'm not a huge reflective paper fan, but this was one of those exercises that really worked with that. And the students really got some insight. And initially when I did it, I was wondering how it was going to work online, but it did. The key element is to make sure that when you do something like this or an activity like this, that you provide enough detailed instruction. That becomes the key. You'll notice what John has posted up here. It goes into a tremendous amount of detail, and that's probably the biggest difference between teaching an asynchronous version of this versus doing it face-to-face. Face-to-face, I can simply stand in front of my classroom and provide those levels of instruction. I can give that to them. Students can take notes. But in the online, you don't have that luxury, so you now have to provide a certain level of clarity in your instruction, but it now has to be text-based. That's the big difference. And here's one of the things that I have found that has been of great value to me. When I started putting things, when I did what I call transitional pedagogy, moving things from the on-ground to the online, what I found was in doing so, I provided this level of detailed text that now became great advantage for my on-ground students as well. So I would post this same thing for them. Now I would stand in front of them and give the instruction and explain everything. But now I have this written text form, and it just becomes as clear. You may have to modify it a little bit just simply because of what you're doing differently in face-to-face versus on-ground. But this becomes the key, is clarity. And the only way that I have ever been able to get to a certain level of clarity with this is to read it and think the same way that my students would. You have to be empathetic to how they are receiving and reading this information. What I have also done is, in being empathetic to their needs, and we talked a little bit about that last week, is that when they have questions, and simply, instead of saying, well, it's already up there, their questions are such that you need to provide some clarity for them. Sometimes that can be done in an email. Sometimes that needs to be done through some other type of face-to-face kind of situation. John?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's really, I think, important. I think that, well, two things I want to point out about the videos here. First of all, I added one video right here from YouTube because I found a relatively short, like a 3-minute video that was written or presented directly by these two. So they explained their own thing. So in 3 minutes, they could see what the intent of this was from the author's perspective. And then Rick had done a great job with the slides already. So rather than me redoing it, I simply used his and gave him credit for it in my online lesson. So up here you can see his reference here. Dr. Fuller's presentation below provides more detail about, and so I just kind of tailored it to what I was doing and maybe added something a little bit to it and used his slides, but he had the majority of this already written. And so you can kind of take other people's if they allow you to do that. I don't particularly think I would do this a lot, like through a whole course where I was using all of his PowerPoint voiceover presentations, but for the ones that were really made the most sense, yeah. And in some cases, I even did use some of the other ones as well, because unfortunately, I was given this course at the very last minute to teach, and I hadn't taught it in years, and it was online. And so for me to completely redo all of them would have been impossible for me to do in the week before I was told that I had to put it, it was last August, and I think I found out I was teaching the course a week in advance. So, so it was very helpful to work collaboratively with others to allow them to share materials, which I'm expecting most people probably do in other departments as well. Any other questions or comments about that? Because I think this is a really good example of how you can take something more complex and still convert it from on or face-to-face to online effectively. And by the way, this was just the introduction to the concept here. And then this was actually a two or 3 week project where they did something this week, and then they had to go out, obviously, as Rick mentioned, to collect all of the information from people that were their peers and so on, and then bring those results back. And I think Dr. Fuller mentioned a paper, a reflective paper. I think I did it in a number of different journal entries, but there's different ways that you can assess it based on what you're doing there. So that's it for guided discovery. Now we're going to move on to the next part, and that is hands-on activities. Many times I think that if you're in class, if you're in a face-to-face class, you actually want them to be doing something, to be starting a project. For example, you might want them to be, you might want to say, okay, I'm talking about pre-service teachers, and say, okay, we're going to talk about how you can use some pretty neat tools that are out on the web that are free, that you could use, open source software. And one of them might be, let's say, a rubrics generator. So you might want to show them, demonstrate to them some different rubrics generators that they can download. And then for the rest of the class time, you might want to have them do it, actually, with their computers, download one of their choice, start to generate a rubric for a lesson that you might have done in a previous day, and actually walk around and help them. And when they have difficulty with that, that would be a hands-on activity. So how do you replicate that in totally online course? So we're going to try to give you some ideas of some things that we've done here, or I've done here, with regard to hands-on activities as well. So the first one is in this same course, again, where I've got both pre-service teachers at the graduate level coming back for second careers as teachers, and they're not yet certified to teach, so they don't know a whole lot about education at this point. And then also in that same class, I might have teachers who have been veterans for 10 years coming back for a master's in instructional leadership. So it's quite a challenge. You've got two different disparate groups here, and you've got to be able to make your assignments so that they're meaningful to both. So this one is it's one of the basic assignments right at the very beginning. It's, I think, week 2 of the course. And the concept of the week is how can I leverage and use existing software that we have in our school district to its maximum benefit. So, for example, most people have either Google Word or the equivalent Google word processing, or Microsoft Word, and almost everybody has Microsoft Word available in addition to Google, even if they're using Google. So what we did is build an activity for them to make sure that they know how to use Word, but not just Word like you would use it as a typical word processor, but to understand some of the nuances and special features of Word. So to try to get them to understand that and to show them the tie to some of the things that were explained in the chapter with regard to that, I built this activity called a newsletter activity, where it's in the same format. I give them the instructions, and this is the document that they see. So up front, I tell them date due, points, rubric, the 3 different ways or pieces that they're going to be graded on, the expected outcomes from the activity. This I could all say, I could talk my way through it if I were in a face-to-face course, but I'm not in a face-to-face course. So I have to be able to provide that information to my students in some way. And then again, specifications, I have to be very detailed in what I want them to do so that I don't get bombarded with 50 million questions from them via email and within Blackboard about what do you mean here and what do I do here and so on. So you've got to make it really clear. And so in this particular case, I tell them what to call their document. I tell them, I differentiate instruction here. In other words, if you're a teacher candidate, you might want to consider doing this. If you're a certified or already experienced teacher, I use the same activity, but maybe give them a different way of them approaching it that's going to be meaningful to them. So what this is to create, a kind of a newsletter and to look at some of the more advanced features of Word that normally 20 years ago would be considered features that would only be available in desktop publishing software that are now routinely available in word processing software. So I tell them specifically what they have to use, what features they have to use in creating their newsletter. And I do not give them direct instruction on how to do this. Like I don't present a whole lot of videos on, okay, how you insert a line between your columns whenever you have 2 columns and so on. Because all of that is available in Microsoft Word Help by clicking the Help button if you just put in the right parameters. So I'm going to have them use the help, as I told them above, to actually look up and see how to do each of these features. And then that's guided. I tell them how to do it. I don't do it for them. And then they have to come up with the actual newsletter and some additional notes about how to submit the newsletter. So what I'm going to do here is show you now an example of the results. In other words, this is what would come back to me from the student. So I told them they have to use, like, for example, in the heading, they have to use word art. They have to have at least 2 columns. They have to use drop caps at the beginning of paragraphs. They have to put a vertical line between their columns. They have to use a page border. They have to insert clip art. They have to insert a picture of themselves. They have to center a footer. I mean, all of those are directly, and then I can grade each one of those specifically. Did they do that just by looking at their output here and give them feedback on that, as well as how well they've written it? Because writing to parents or to students, in this case, this could be like a newsletter to introduce them as a student teacher. And they could pass it out. It could go home to parents, what have you. That was for pre-service teachers. For already existing teachers, I told them, create a 1-page newsletter for your class, or for if you're a moderator of an activity flyer, or whatever you want to do, as long as you use those same features. So then they can directly apply the concepts to an activity in class. And as I mentioned, this is done in both when I teach this course online, and also when, as you can see here, on ground, and also online. But when it's online, you just have to be much more explicit in terms of what you want them to do, so that they have no question. I've used this for a number of years, and I never really get any questions about it. They just do it, and the next week it's done, and then I grade it. But that probably took a couple of semesters of tweaking the instructions based on the questions I initially got, in order to make it more clear moving forward, which you can refine it just like we do all the time with our instruction over time. Anybody have any questions on that particular example of hands-on activity and how to facilitate it potentially in a online class? Okay, another example. It isn't using Microsoft Word. It's using web-based software that is free, or it's a cloud-based product. And this is quite popular now in K-12 schools, so they need to become familiar with how they can use some of these different things. So when they go out to student teaching, they will recognize these as potential tools that they can use, as well as if you're a teacher who is already veteran teacher for 10 years, you might not realize that this is even available now, and maybe it's introducing you to some concept new that you might want to consider using as well. And this is referred to as mind mapping software. We used to use Inspiration. The company dissolved over time. That happens. And so we come up with alternatives, and this was an alternative I came up with. And it doesn't require purchasing any additional software. It's on the cloud. Anybody can do it. Anybody can use it. So what I did here was I built an activity again in a Word document, and then same layout, as you can see at the top, the rubric where I segment what they're doing. And then I also included screen images directly from the website, and gave them full instructions of what they need to do when they're in that website, in order to be able to download the software, or use the software, or learn how to use the software on their own, because there's tutorials there that are online for them to do. So here's part 2. Step 1, set up your free account. I tell them how to do that. Step 2, read about MindMeister for Education. I show them little pieces of where to click on the website in order to be able to do that effectively. Part 3, view the instructional videos that tell them how to use it. And those are right on the web with MindMeister that are available. So there's a 3-minute, a 2-minute, a 2-minute, a 2-minute. So it's not going to take them long, but it shows them how to do it and how to use the buttons and so on. And then use this first video that also talks about using MindMeister from an outside perspective, not from the company's perspective. So that gives them all the background. So in other words, I'm teaching them and guiding them through how they learn to use MindMeister without me walking them through it with a video of my own and reinventing the wheel. I'm using the information that's out there. Caveat and advice here. If you're doing this and you teach it from semester to semester, you have to go back each semester and make sure that the software, that the website looks the same. In other words, if they haven't changed something on the website, or a button that you told them to go to down here no longer is there, or doesn't look like that, or can be found somewhere else. So it is a little bit of work you got to do each semester if you're being this detailed about using an external source that has the potential of changing, as websites do. That's the only caveat. Fortunately, in most cases, I've found that I get 2 or 3 semesters out of it before I have to change it, based on their changes to their websites. Next, part 4 of this, as they go down through this process of self-learning plus developing their own MindMeister mind map, is to answer certain questions. Because then I want to know, did you actually go through the stuff? Can you really see how this is supposed to be used? So then they type their answers to the questions right in here. And then they present this Word document back to me along with their mind map. Now, because their mind map, they can, once they create it online, they can actually download it to a Word document. It can be embedded right in the Word document, which you'll see coming up here, that they created on their own, that I can grade all in one document. So the last part, 80 points out of the assignment, is that they actually have to develop their own mind map. In this particular case, this was the instructions. And here's the example that was returned to me by a student. So as they went down through here, they did this. You can see here that their responses, they answered a question here. They answered this question here. They answered here. They answered their opinion here. They gave and indicated their lesson here. I said, now let's develop a mind map based on a particular lesson that you're coming up with. So they had to describe their lesson. This person was describing a lesson for 12th grade marketing class. And they described the concept that they were going to use this MindMeister mind map for. And then here they embedded it in, and it was graded on the basis of 80 points. And here's how their mind map looked, so that they could use it as an advanced organizer for a new chapter that they were starting on online marketing. So that just gives you an idea of how you can get students to walk through an entire activity and replicate what you might try to do in class. And I used this particular one for the first time, I think it was either the fall of 19 or this past spring. I think it was this past spring. But anyway, I only had one question on the instructions out of the whole class the whole time, and they all came back with very meaningful mind maps. So, and none of them had ever used MindMeister before. So I would consider it fairly successful. And when I asked for feedback on the course, they thought it was a valuable, for the most part, they thought it was a valuable experience. So that's another way that you can facilitate hands-on learning and also kind of hands-on learning, guided discovery combination. Here's a couple examples of some other things that you can, other instructional aids, such as using advanced organizers or providing students with examples. Here's an example of an advanced organizer that I give in a project-based course at the beginning of the course, to tell them each week what their assignments are going to be and how those assignments are going to be embedded in as part, the results of their assignments are going to be embedded in as their final, into one of their final projects. So they have a project that's due week 4, a minor project, and then they have a major project due week 8 in an 8-week course called Instructional Design Project. And all of the assignments throughout the course build up to being able to provide the final project week 8. And I give them an advanced organizer showing what assignments, which weeks are going, and what components of those are going to go into either the first project or the second. So week 1, they're going to do 2 assignments for me, and that is going to lay the groundwork for the shorter project that's due week 4. And then weeks 2 through 7, the components from there are going to lead to their final project that's due week 8. So that's just another idea of how, now if I were in class and this were face-to-face, I'd be talking them through this the whole time in week 1. and giving them a verbal explanation of all of this. But in light of the fact that I can't, I thought this is the next best approach in an online class. A second example here is the use of previous student work. Notice that in the attachment here, I give them their field specs, that is their field project specifications, like the directions for what they're supposed to do. But at the same time, I give them a couple of examples of previous projects that were completed by previous students, one with some comments that I made and one without some comments that I made, so that they could see up front, very early on, week 1 or 2, what they're gearing toward, trying to accomplish during week 8. It always helps to be able to visually see what some end results look like, so that you know how to put your own together. So that's another example of how you can provide, because I would do this if I were in a face-to-face course. I would simply bring them up on the projector and show previous student examples. Well, can't do that exactly, but I can provide those, taking out, of course, all of the student information about who it was and when it was done and so on, and also getting permission from the students to use them as examples previously. And another idea with regard is to the online delivery is course content summary. In other words, instead of always making a voice-over PowerPoint presentation that's necessarily to go along with a chapter of material of important concepts, you may want to do it in written form. So for example, here's a chapter 17 summary points, which I brought up or gave to them as a Word document, and simply went through the chapter and pulled out what I thought the main points were, even referenced specific pages from the chapter, and did it in logical sequence as they read through the chapter, so that they will be able to better see the things that I think needed to be highlighted from the chapter, because they're probably going to be using it at some point in an activity, an online discussion, or some other type of graded or non-graded assessment for the course. Okay, here is another example of, in this case, providing content summary in another form. So we talked already about several different ways to provide content summary. You can do it in a video. You can do it in voice-over PowerPoint slides. You can do it in a Word document like I just showed you on the previous slide. Here's another example where you can use PowerPoint and turn it into a booklet. In other words, instead of making it slides just for something maybe different or novel, especially when you want to draw diagrams, which I can draw easily in PowerPoint, or bring diagrams from textbook by scanning them in, turn it to portrait from landscape, and then use some buttons here so you can go through, use a little bit of animation, put text boxes in, and the text boxes actually talk specifically about how the concepts from this chapter and from the course are going to relate directly to their final project, so that they can see how to build it more appropriately. So it says, now taking a look at the instructional program and seminar planning, how this is going to relate directly to your instructional design project. Notice the diagrams and the use of some text and highlighted text and so on that they can go through. And segmenting out the different levels of planning that they have to go through for their ID project, and which ones they have to concentrate on for the project, and what each one of their daily modules will look like, their lesson plans will look like, and then maybe some effective things that they can point to. Like, for example, I had some links in there that was not necessarily in logical order, but if you're in PowerPoint, you can actually use those links at the bottom to take you back and forth where you need to. Click on diagrams to show you other things and so on. But that's just an overview to show you that you can use some pretty basic software and still create some pretty nice things that can present concepts in maybe a little different way if you think a little bit outside the box with regard to how you use some tools such as PowerPoint. Okay, now I think we're going to skip over this in the interest of time here. I was going to kind of take you through it and show you how this all looks in one form, but I think you get the idea that each one of these slides I gave you was an extract from a course. But when you actually put it all together, all of these become the items under each one of your main links for week 1, week 2, week 3, and so on. So you might have like 6 or 7 of these items in a row under a particular week. Or you might have 1 or 2 folders. When you click on from the left navigation panel, one might say, and there's different ways to organize that. One might say your instructional materials, then the next folder would be, okay, all of the assessments. Or you can decide to present some material, do an assessment, present some material, do an assessment, in which case you would organize it differently. There's lots of different ways to organize this effectively. It's based on what you think makes the most sense. And I don't do the same thing in all my courses. It depends on the content and whether it's a hands-on delivery course or primarily a discussion-based course, or whether it's mostly a theoretical course. It really does depend on the nature of the content to a large extent. Okay, so to recap for face-to-face now, I think we have already mentioned this, but I think it's worth repeating. When instructors, you as an instructor is not available for a class meeting, same as for online, when you're in a face-to-face course, if you'd have these lessons chunked and developed in this way, you can almost, as Rick mentioned before, take that whole lesson out and plop it in to an on-ground course. And if you already have a Blackboard shell for your on-ground course with minimal information in for each week as opposed to the full explanation of everything, you can still embed one of these with very little trouble into your face-to-face course. So you might want to consider using it also when you're flipping a lesson. Now, flipping a lesson is not the same as providing an online lesson in lieu of. Flipping a lesson means that you're still going to be in class and you've just decided to have them do what you normally would do in class as homework or offline on their own time. And then when they come to class, your class time is used for you to walk around and help them, facilitate moving them either in groups or individually. That's true flipping. So flipping, it doesn't mean when you're at a conference, you give them an online lesson and you're not there. No, that's an online lesson. And that's when the instructional hours need to be replicated. So please try to keep those two. A lot of people call that flipping your lesson whenever you're not there. That's not the way the terminology is used in the literature, and that's not really what we mean by flipping a lesson. So we can have more on that as time goes on with regard to how you flip lessons and so on. I think there's a lot of materials already out on Blackboard, our Blackboard shell with regard to that. And you may have questions in the future about the whole concept of using these online lessons to actually meet instructional hours when you're not in class. And there's going to be more opportunities for that, I believe, coming up in the fall based on virtually rotated classes. So we can talk about that when all of us know more about that, which we don't really know right now. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to do is to turn this over to Shannon, and I believe she's going to give us a demonstration specifically of how to do some of the things that you saw in the lessons that I just demonstrated. Particularly, you saw a lot of links, right, within the lessons, links to videos and YouTubes and so on. So I'm going to turn it over to her now and let her do a demonstration of that. So I'm going to turn this off. All right.
Okay. Right. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Great. I'm just going to present the entire screen here. Can everybody see my screen? Awesome. Okay, so so the first thing I'm going to show you is how to embed YouTube videos. So I'm just going to create a content item. And this I'm using it in a content item, but you can, for example, do the same thing in a discussion or pretty much anything, any kind of content holder that you use in Blackboard. And I'm just going to call it. Okay. So over here, I have a YouTube video. It's about an octopus named Nora, and I'm going to click the share button here and grab, and that's going to let me, that automatically copies this to my, what's that called? My, it just copies it. Sorry.
Clipboard?
There you go. That's the word. Oh my gosh. It's having a total brain freeze. So a lot of times I see people just paste that in this text box, and that works. But I think it's a lot more interesting looking and robust if you can just, if you embed it. So sorry, I'll go back here. What you want to do is you want to select this little icon that says Insert Edit Embedded Media. And you just copy the URL right here where it says URL. And this will populate automatically. You just insert, and when you're looking at it in this preview mode, you're going to see just like this little blank box here, and you might think, oh no, it's not working, but it is. And then just as a note, you can also, sorry about that, you can also, you know, add some text here, you know, whatever you want to do here. And then when you're satisfied with that, you can just click submit. And you'll see the video shows up right in your Blackboard shell, so they don't have to leave the Blackboard shell to view the video. But they can if they want to, like if they want to look at it on a bigger screen, they can, you know, go visit that on YouTube or whatever. So any questions about that? That's pretty straightforward, I know. Okay. So the next thing, and John, if there's something specifically that you want me to demonstrate, I'm happy to do that. I wasn't sure exactly what you had in mind, but I'm happy to.
Well, you saw the links that I put in. You already showed them how to copy those in. But there's also, like, if you have a paragraph of text and you highlight one of the words, you can hyperlink to it.
Sure.
The video too. So you might want to show them that would be a third way that they could insert videos in.
Okay, great. So yeah, so let's talk. So say you have, okay, so first of all, I'm going to show you this. So this is, I'm just sticking with our octopus theme. This is just the page from Wikipedia. Say I want this content in my Blackboard shell. But, yeah, okay, so you see how there's, oops, that's not what I meant to do. You see how there's like lots of formatting here, like this is bold, and then there's lots of, you know, Wikipedia links all through here, and I don't really want that stuff to show. So I'm just gonna paste this into Notepad. And what this does, and I do this all the time when I'm working in Blackboard, is this takes out all of the formatting, which is really useful because sometimes when you copy formatting from a website into Blackboard, which kind of has its own formatting, things can get really weird really fast. It's like the different formattings are, you know, competing with each other, and it just gets crazy. So here you see now I'm able to just paste this text in here just as plain text. But suppose I want this piece of text to link to something. So I'm going to use the same video just as an example here. Let's do this. So I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to, I'm trying to think here a good way to do this because, and John, if you know a better way to do this, you can let me know. But so
No, that's exactly how I do it. And then just click the hyperlink and put the hyperlink there. Yeah, that works.
Oh, and that's actually the, so I'm going to do copy, and then I'm going to click on this little hyperlink. And oh, and here's a note. If you go in here and you don't see all these menu options here, like say you might just see sort of an abbreviated version of them, you just click this little down arrow to get all of them. But you click this hyperlink button, paste it in there. And then usually what I do is I want to say open in a new window. And what that does is it means that that whatever you're linking to here will open in a separate browser window over here, and they won't have to click the back button to get back to the Blackboard shell. There you go. And then just to show you what I mean about in the new window, you see how this opens over here. We don't want that. Goodbye. But yeah, you know what I mean. Okay, so that's basically how I would hyperlink text and embed a video. Was there anything else, John, that you wanted me to show?
No, I don't think so.
You mentioned handouts.
What's that?
You mentioned linking to handouts.
Yeah, but I think that that you just showed it can be done the same way. It doesn't have to be a YouTube video. Maybe if you could just show them that, like if you have a Word document you want to link to or something.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so I'm just going to use the same text that I already put in here. And let's say we want, I'm just going to select some random text here. So you can, and this is how you attach a file. So you can, so if it's a file that's accessible on the web somewhere, you can use the same method that I just showed you and link it as a hyperlink. But if it's something that you want to upload from your computer, you want to insert it as a file. And this is the part that so you want to copy this. So I'm going to highlight this text and I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to click this link and I'm going to say, so content collection is anything that's been uploaded into your Blackboard shell already. I will say that this is a little bit hard to navigate, in my opinion. You can look at this folder would have, it should have anything that you, like I said, anything that was copied over when your course shell was created or anything that you've uploaded previously. But generally what I do is I just upload from my computer. So I'm gonna just pick a random, use this instructional time handout, a random PDF. I'm gonna click open. So this part can get a little frustrating because it says name of link to file, and the default is going to be the name of the document that you that you're uploading. And then alt text, you want to just put a description of whatever you're uploading. And I'm just going to write description for now. And I'm going to click submit to show you. This is to show you what happens when you do this. So this all looks good. Submit. And you see that it's overwritten the content of, so it says the original text that was there has changed, and that's usually not what you want it to do. So for that, that's why I'm going to show you. I'm going to upload this, open, and then instead of instructional time handout.pdf, I'm going to replace that with, and we'll just pick a random thing for that. And then once again, you generally want this to open in a new window unless you have a really good reason not to. Submit. There you go. So now you can see it's retained that text that you put in there. Then your document should open. There you go. So that's the PDF. See how it's opened in a different window, and it's here, and it does this kind of weird thing, which I don't really know how to get around. But it puts like a little a new paragraph there. But okay, is that good, John? Is there anything else you wanted me to go over?
Yeah, that's good. I just wanted them to know that there's multiple ways to link link anything from either the web or from your own hard drive. And the formatting is a little bit of an issue. So if you get practice with one approach that you really like, consistently use it. You could see that I didn't even, in most of my examples, I didn't even bother to change the name of the file. I just left the file name there that they could click on. That's just easier, but you don't have to do that. You can go through and actually have it embedded in as part of the paragraph, which sometimes I prefer.
Yeah,
So,
it just depends on the content, I think, that you're working with. Sometimes one way makes sense and sometimes the other way makes sense. So
exactly. But that's exactly it, to know when you want to use the embed media element button that you showed versus when you want to use the paperclip attach a file. Those are both ways of getting links to work in there. The reason that I don't like to use the one where the big video box comes up is because if I have 5 or 6 YouTube videos that I want them to view, each 2 or 3 minutes long each, it's a lot more condensed if I just give the links rather than that. But if I'm only doing one, then I will use that where they can click right on the video box, if that makes sense to everyone. Okay, anybody have any questions for Shannon about this, or me, or anyone else? No?
So I see there's a few questions in the chat. Okay. Presumably this is directed towards me. When you're building content, what's the difference between an item and a file, and how did you decide to when to use each? Let me just share my screen again. I think, and Carol, let me know if I'm not answering your question, okay? So are you talking about here, item versus file? I assume that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
So in general, I will always use item. I know there's not a ton of difference here. I'm just going to show you what happens. So if you create a file, it's kind of the same steps that I just walked through, except you get to choose whether it opens in a new window. I'm just going to add the same document that I added before, and I'm just going to show you what it looks like when I add this. I'll call this instruction. Go. So this is gonna so this I added as an item, and this I added as a file. So you'll see it has a different icon here, and this is just, there's no description that shows here. It just links to the file. So I mean, you can accomplish the same thing with both tools. I pretty much add everything as an item because that gives you the option to add an audio file or a video file or an image or text or anything. So it's a little bit redundant, I think, but yeah, that's the big difference. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. And then Roseanne said if I wanted
I just wanted to add that I rarely use the file option because unless I have a left navigation link over to the side and I say, like say instructor handouts. And then when I go into or click the left navigation link, then I'll open each one up as a file because they're just listed as files. And
Sure.
then you can download them or open them. But if you want to say anything about the files, or if you want to have a lesson associated with it or anything, you can't use file. You can only use item. That's why Shannon's idea is great, to just pretty much always default to item and then only use file when you just want to have a listing of files under a particular link.
Sure. Good points.
Shannon, I have a different question. When I'm trying to create the verbiage that goes into, a course outline, a weekly outline, I want it formatted, but I want to copy it to a document that I can save for my own, or maybe I want to write it initially as a Word document and copy and paste it. The formatting always changes from one to the if it will be Arial forms in Blackboard, but when I copy and paste it into a Word document, it changes to, I forget, Helvetica or Inherit or something like that. And if I start with Arial in Word, when I put it in Blackboard, I'll get different font sizes, I'll get different boldings. Do you have a suggestion for how to create in one format and then copy and paste it into Blackboard?
Yeah, so, I'm sorry, John, were you going to say something?
Oh, yeah. I'm just going to comment first, and then you can, Shannon, too, if I miss anything. I struggle with that. Everybody struggles with that all of the time. And I think what Shannon showed you before about using Notepad is a great idea. What's happening there, if you know anything about HTML, the HTML code's getting scrambled. And because there are certain characters in Word that is being brought over into Blackboard, and it's being incorporated in with the HTML code on Blackboard, since it's a web-based product. And so the best thing to do is to bring anything from a Word document over and bring it into Blackboard as loose text without formatting. When that's what Notepad does. That's one way to avoid it, but you lose all of your formatting from your Word document. You've got to reformat your bold and so on in Blackboard. The other thing you can try to do is use Arial 10 all the time for your Word document, because if you copy Arial 10 format over to Blackboard, 9 times out of 10 it will maintain its integrity, and it will be Arial 10 in Blackboard, is what I've noticed. So I do that an awful lot before I copy something from Word into Blackboard, which is usually what you want to do. When I copy from Blackboard into Word, like if I want to save all my text in a online discussion, for example, and keep it on file on my computer, you're right, it changes all the formatting and it does all kinds of weird things. I just highlight everything and change it all to Arial 10, and then put any important formatting back in, so that it's ready to copy back into another Blackboard shell should I need to. It's a lot of fooling around, but basically that's what you have to do. Now, if you have a table in Word and you have it all in Arial 10, 9, or 8, and you copy it directly into Blackboard, it will maintain the integrity of the table. I do that all the time, which it didn't used to do years ago, but it does now, especially when I build my rubrics, for example. So it takes a lot of practice and a lot of finesse to deal with that formatting. But the easiest way for the novice is to simply make it raw text to begin with, bring it into Blackboard, and format it in Blackboard however you want to. Shannon, do you have anything to add to that? Or Rick?
Go ahead, Shannon, because there's another question.
No, I was going to kind of demo that really quick. I don't know if that's a good use of our time or not, but just let me know if you want to see.
It's, you know what, any of this is always a problem, especially if you're cutting and copying and pasting, from Word, where you've really formatted things the way you want them, and then you bring them over, especially if you've got tables. Tables just do not size out right. In other words, if you've got any kind of columns and tables that you've put in, they just do not transfer well. And it's absolutely what John said, is the HTML scrambling. It's just a difficult thing. A lot of times sometimes it is best just to leave it in Word and let them open it up in Word and let them view it that way, because that way then they can see exactly what you want them to see, as opposed to having it open up in Blackboard. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not. There's no hard and fast rules, Kathleen.
That's a really good point, Rick, and that's one of the reasons why in a lot of the examples I showed earlier, right, I had everything in a big Word document so that I could format it however I wanted and simply attach it as a Word document. They open it, everybody can open Word, and then you don't have any of those formatting issues.
One of the things I would tell you
a lot of times too, except that, in the initial week overview, you want to have things formatted so that they could see the weekly overview. And, that's one of the things I'd like to keep.
And sometimes you can, and sometimes you just need to type it directly in, or, it's what, Shannon, go ahead.
All I was going to say is I usually just copy it. So the weekly overviews, I usually just copy it into Notepad like I demonstrated here, and then copy that all into Blackboard, and then I just go through, I bold this, use, add a bulleted list here, and that's usually the fastest way to do it. It's not ideal. It would be great if you could just copy it over and keep the formatting. If you could format it in Word, copy that over, and it would retain the formatting. But and if you know anything, if you are someone who is comfortable editing HTML, you can access that just right here, so you can see all the markup there.
Yeah, I do that because I know HTML, but even knowing HTML, it's all compressed, and it's very difficult to find exactly what it is that you want to change. So that's my last resort for sure. Yeah. The easiest way that I find for like the weekly outline and so on, there's no way that I know of, and if someone knows, I would be so happy to find out if there's any way to keep any kind of the integrity of the formatting in Word as you copy it in. You just can't. You bring in the text and format it using the format bars in Blackboard is about the only way you can go with that specific thing in mind.
I've also noticed that varying versions, as we upgrade to different versions of Blackboard, the HTML coding and the transferring and all of that changes. So what used to work no longer works, and it just gets convoluted. Roseanne asked the question, if I wanted to link an assignment that should be submitted via Blackboard into week 1, for example, I would use browse content for that, correct? Roseanne, do you want to add a little clarity to that? I'm not exactly sure what you're asking there.
So typically, say there's a paper due, I would walk them through how to use Turnitin and how to submit it straight into Blackboard. So if I have an assignment that they're submitting right into Blackboard, but I want it to be part of, okay, I'm going to look at week 7, I know this is due. Can I link something right within that item for week whatever, that when they click on it, takes them to where to submit the assignment?
Yes.
Or is that not possible?
You can provide, one of the things that you can provide is links to anything. You can link anywhere within Blackboard to anything within your course shell, or wherever you want them to go. You can establish, and this is a very, very important point, you want to provide a seamless navigation for anything that you're doing. The biggest and the first rule is keep it simple for the students. Always keep it simple for them. Don't hide your stuff. So if you want something, so if you're making an assignment, if I understand this correctly, you're making the assignment in week 1 and explaining everything, and this is what I want you to do. I want you to do this, 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 this. It will be due in week 7. So what you can simply do is tell them that information in week 1. You can provide from week 1 to week 7. A link to that if you so choose, or you can go directly to week 7 as you post that up and put a submission point for Turnitin there. It's a very simple thing. I do this all the time. In other words, the first week I provide a big assignment that they've got several weeks to do, and then I post the submission point in week 7 or wherever I want it to be. And then that can go directly into Turnitin, which ultimately then will show up within your gradebook, which I believe, John, you're going to show a little bit of that on Wednesday. So kind of stay tuned. We'll see where we can go and what you can do with that. It's pretty straightforward, Roseanne.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I can just do it like I would any other link without even having to do browse content.
Yes.
It's called a course link.
Yeah, just a course link.
Thank you.
That's the real neat thing. You can show navigation and put it in there. You want to keep all this as seamless and as easy as possible. And I would tell you, keep it simple. If there's a difficult way and an easy way to do it, do the easy way.
Another way, Rick, there to do that, because I do like you do that linking a lot, but if you don't want to do that, I've tried this before and it works out pretty well. You give the instructions wherever you want, and then you have a left navigation panel link that says assignments, and then you just put all of your assignments one after the other in the left navigation panel under that link, and they always know through the whole course, anytime I want to submit assignment, I go over to the assignments link in the left navigation panel to submit it. it works, and it's pretty straightforward, and you don't even have to worry about linking. But again, it's whatever style you prefer.
Yeah, I think the other thing is this: consistency. This is what we meant by not one size fits all or not looking, but you have to be consistent in how you structure. In other words, the same way that you establish routine in your face-to-face class, you're establishing a very similar kind of routine in your online classes, so that when students come into your shell, they know where to go, they know what to do. They're not sitting around trying to figure out and guess where you want things or where you've hidden things. Keep it simple and keep your navigation routine. All right, there's another question. Myrna asked a question. In Mac, what is the equivalent of Notepad? I cannot answer that. I am not a Mac person. John, I don't think you're really a Mac guy either.
Sorry, no, but I know it can be done. Because I know my daughters do it all the time on their Macs, but I'm not a Mac person either. But we can find an answer for you and let you know.
The program is called Text Edit.
Okay.
On Mac.
Thank you. I figured somebody might know. Okay. Text edit is Shannon already wrote it. Thank you. And okay, John.
Okay. And really, that's pretty much what we had. So when I bring up my screen, you'll see, are there any, this was the recap for what we did today, which we just went through everything. So considering various examples, of how to provide direct instruction, guided discovery, hands-on, other instructional aids. Those aren't the only ways you can do it. Those are just some examples. We concentrated for online asynchronous, but a lot of these things can be also adapted for face-to-face. And as we mentioned before, and also how to link important information we tried to address here toward the end through hands-on. And so, Rick, I'll turn it back over to you and see if anybody has any suggestions for future topics based on our discussions today before we end.
Just a couple of final comments and thoughts, and we'll open it up for some questions and anything else. A lot of people think that online is automating. I'm just putting things up and I'm automating, I can walk away. This is not that in any way, shape, or form. What you are doing is providing a level of clarity, and this is one of the things that you have to think about. John has shown you a tremendous number of opportunities throughout all of the different kind of pedagogies that you can employ and some examples of how he's done. But the one thing that I hope you picked up and caught from all this was the level of detail and the specific instructions that kind of, when you're standing in front of a classroom, you're thinking through your head. But all of this has to be done prior to that. So a lot of this is not, I don't want to use the term winging it, because that's not exactly what we do. But you have to pre-plan all this. Whereas you go into a class, you can say, oh, I know the assignment and I'm going to just explain it. And you do this off your head because that's what you've done. This now requires far more pre-planning, far more instructional development as you're going through this whole process. But in doing so, the one thing that you notice from what John has shown you in the examples is the level of clarity in explanation. In other words, the directions and the instructions that he provides in text have a level of clarity that the students can understand. And for the most part, probably 90–95% of the students will understand just reading what John had written. Occasionally, you will get students who just don't understand, and then they're going to email you. And sometimes you can get clear in an email. Sometimes you need to talk them through it. A lot of times this is just how that student happens to process. So that's where we go with that little bit of empathy and that instructor presence. Just be open to what they're asking. The bottom line is this: if it makes sense to you, it will make sense to the students. If it doesn't make sense to you, if you're looking at something and I'm not sure how they're going to get that, they probably won't. So that becomes the acid test for me. The other thing John talked about that I just wanted to throw my 2 cents into was the concept of flipping. We hear a lot about the flipped classroom. Well, this is all blurred and merged together. You've got flipping. In the traditional flipping, it's where you deliver your lecture through video and then you have classroom time where you can practice and do different things. Lots of fun things with that. The literature is moving a little bit on that. We're flipping now. You can flip lots of different things. You can flip discussions. You can flip group work. You can flip any one of the pedagogies that we would do in any face-to-face. You can flip those over to the point that this now becomes blended learning. This becomes hybrid approach. And it's not just online versus on ground. This now becomes, and again, those lines blur, where you now start to see that there are opportunities and there are certain things that are better taught face-to-face, obviously, and other things that are better taught online, and then many things that can be taught online. I argue this, and we'll probably talk a little bit about this Friday, that certain discussions, classroom discussions may be better, certain classroom discussions may be better in a discussion board. Other classroom discussions may be better face-to-face. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's you as the instructor deciding what pedagogy is best going to serve helping the students to learn and to process. This becomes the key with this. So John has gone through a tremendous amount of information today in what I consider to be a relatively short period of time. But here's what I would ask. Does anybody have any questions of things or things that you would like to see us talk about based upon some of the details that you've seen this morning? All right, hearing none, I thank you all for your time. If you do come up with ideas or things that you want, we have gathered some today, I think, of some things that I think we would like to approach and like to do. So we may be doing some, what I would call some intermediate and some advanced sessions here in the next weeks and months to come that may help address some things. But our goal with these sessions is to really give you some basic understanding of what can be done and to help you to start to think pedagogically in a different direction, not just face-to-face, but also what could be done synchronously, what can be done asynchronously online, and what the opportunities are. So hopefully you're walking away with those. I thank you all very much for your time. As you've got questions, we're around. Please keep in touch with us.